everybody to the artist talk today for Living Inside. Thank you so much for coming out in the cold. We appreciate it. I will say before we get started that tomorrow the gallery will be closed due to weather, but we're very appreciative that you guys did come out today. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
I'm very appreciative that we're appreciative that you guys came out today to come to this beautiful artist talk with Jeffrey Greene and James Pinder. This is for our exhibit for Community Partners in Action, the Prison Arts Program, and this exhibit is called Living Inside. I'm gonna let Jeffrey and James introduce themselves now.
After all that, you're gonna, oh, all right. Why don't you introduce yourself first?
My name is James Pinder, call me Jim, whatever. I was incarcerated for 30 years. I got out a year ago. For most of that 30 years, I've known this gentleman, Mr. Jeffrey Greene, one of my favorite people on the planet, and I'm not just saying that.
We got that? You got that?
It's true. The Prison Arts Program I've always been an artist since I was young, but the Prison Arts Program helped me be an artist in prison with supplies, with encouragement. Obviously, prison is a very dark, negative place that will tear you down if you let it. That's the normal inertia of prison. So you have to fight against it, stay positive. Like I said, I was down for 30 years. Right around 8 to 10 years, most people start to break down mentally. I've seen it many, many times. So one of the things that kept me from breaking down was creative projects, was art. Was Jeff constantly yelling at me, yeah, bring something for the show.
Why was I yelling at you?
Well, yeah, writing me angry letters. Where's the artwork? Where's the artwork? So,
Encouragement.
so the program is really beneficial. It still is. It's still going on. It's incredible how long this guy's been doing it for. He hasn't changed much. So, but that's me.
Hmm. And you got out when? You got out
A year.
exactly a year?
Well,
When?
a year and like 2 months. Yeah, last November.
Amen. And how's it going?
Good. Well, I got a I was sentenced to 40 years. I got a commutation by the governor, whatever. And then, yeah,
Governor, whatever. That meant that much to you. James Pinder. So James Pinder, you can see his work is right over here on the wall. So just to flesh out Mr. Pinder just a little bit, I'm honored to be sitting next to you. I'm honored to be sitting next to you as well. But Mr. Pinder is a longtime participant, 24 years he participated in prison arts, something like that. And when Mr. Pinder started, he was the first. I remember the first drawings you made were wasn't anime, but it was like comic book art, things like that. And I think, beyond everything else, and I'll explain who I am, but prison arts really tries to encourage people to make artwork that only exists because they exist. Unique artwork. And you discover who you are by making art. And I think that, and one of the things that I've always encouraged is for people, not to make the typical prison art. There's so much art that people make in prison, that is just inherent to the prison experience. And one of the things that I'm really asking people to do is to get past all of those typical genres of prison art, but also try to you're living in prison. Don't let the prison live in your art and live inside you. And then here's Mr. Pinder, who became a real mirror of the prison. One of the things that I'm really asking you not to do, and became sort of the Norman Rockwell of the Connecticut prison system. You see it in his work. These are these exquisite colored pencil. They're colored pencil drawings. How long would one of these large drawings take you?
The bigger ones are usually about 50 to 70 hours.
Yeah, easily. Exquisite drawings. And if you've ever been incarcerated and you see one of these drawings, it's going to bring you right back viscerally into the prison. You know, there are things about him. There's the self-portrait that's in the center of this wall of drawings. And you've got this digital antenna.
Yeah.
That, you know, no civilian really has ever seen a digital antenna. I don't know if you've ever seen those, but those are being manipulated and cellmates are battling over the position of those things.
Okay.
And then there's an orange that's in the window, and I know I'm supposed to just be introducing myself, but I just wanted to really introduce Mr. Pinder, is that these metal windows, they conduct the cold from outside. So the windowsill becomes sort of a refrigerator in your cell. And when you see that, when you're looking at this drawing and you've been incarcerated, when you have prison experience, you feel it right away. You know, that it's a minimal drawing. It's sort of, you know, clean, simple, but it's totally prison. And, you know, he's become, like, several of these drawings were, the two that are on the side there are illustrations. We illustrated the Washington Post Sunday magazine back in 2018. I think it was 2018, 2019. One of those, pre-COVID. And he had several drawings in there. And they're just these powerful drawings. So I'm honored to be with you right now. So I'm the program manager of Prison Arts. If you were here last Saturday, I think I talked too much describing what the hell I'm doing. But Community Partners in Action is the agency. And Community Partners in Action has just celebrated our 150th year of work in the state of Connecticut. 150 years of work. And Mark Twain was on the first board of directors. And Prison Arts really carries on the mission that started 150 years ago. And that's bringing the outside world into the prison so that the prison isn't this closed space that really has no pertinence to the outside world. To really, like, constantly remind you and to remind everyone that's working in the prison, because we don't exist for the incarcerated, we exist for everyone involved in the prison system. Specifically the prison itself, the physical prison. We're trying to change the environment of the prison. When you're working on your artwork in a table, in a prison, in a cell block, it's changing that physical environment. And it changes the way people in that physical environment interact. And that's really what we're trying to do, is we're trying to make the prison a positive, hopeful place where the revelations that you have, I mean, who you are now versus who you were when you went into prison. Like for any of us, obviously, if you've 30 years of our lives, so we change. But the way that you've thought and the things that you've thought about, and some of the things that you've thought about, the depth with which you've thought about things, maybe someone, a civilian, could never even grasp. But when you get out of prison, and you'll probably talk about this, but when you get out of prison, that time that you spend in prison becomes compartmentalized, becomes this.
It really does.
Really does. And so you forget a lot of those revelations that you have in prison, you're going to forget. A lot of the experience and realizations you had, they're just part of some real bad month you had, right? The way your brain works. When you have these drawings, they not only bring you back to the thoughts that you were having, they bring you back to where you were making it.
100%.
And so you remember those moments, that you'll never forget those moments. It's essential that that be the case. People are walking around after decades in prison, and everything that they figured out in prison, it never happened. You know, they're back to square one. People are just back to square one. It's such a freaking waste, you know, in so many ways. And so Prison Arts has become, you know, there was a time when it really was, you know, like this condescending idea of if we bring the humanities into prison, it'll make people more human, you know, which, I mean, I guess we could think that way, but it was really the humanities, bringing like an art teacher and still lives into the prison. So like I remember going to Cheshire Correctional in 1991, and really that's what the art class was. The art class was a group of guys all wearing the same clothes. They just, you know, all showered in the same place, all eating the same food. And now they were all drawing the same vase of flowers. right? So one, it just reaffirmed, the most like simplistic, stereotypical idea of what art and art education is. It's drawing something that exists in front of you rather than drawing something out of yourself, right? So that you can see it and then you can present it to the world. But everyone's drawn that same vase of flowers, which is just, ugh. And then on top of that, for prison arts, one of the things that we think about beyond like encouraging you to make art that only exists because you exist, I really want you to wake up at 3 a.m. to look at your drawing. I want you to be thinking about it, and have it wake you up. And no one's going to wake up at 3 a.m. to look at a vase of flowers that they drew. It's just not going to happen. And so really that's what prison arts has become. Prison arts has become this thing where it really encourages people to undertake these ambiguous endeavors. And so I've been involved with it now. It's my 35th year of being involved with it. I'm real lucky to be involved with it. And we organize, we have a permanent collection. This is part of that permanent collection. We organize an annual show that many years, I think it is the largest annual exhibition of art from prison in the world. There is in Louisiana, they've got the Rodeo Art Show in Angola prison, which, we can't compete with that. And that might actually be larger in its own way. They have people go to the rodeo, about this now? It's like incredible. And the artists can have tables on one side of the fence, and then you could be on the other side of the fence as a civilian looking at that art. And that really can't be topped. That's incredible. But it's this incredible annual show, and we really try to encourage families to come to the show, because when you go to visit your loved ones in prison, it's demeaning. No matter what you do, it's demeaning. And so to really do something where, like, you can just see with this permanent collection, the way that we present the work is at the highest possible level. Is that, everything that we do, we try to do it to show the most respect and dignity for the efforts of the people that have made this work. And to also encourage you not to condescend to it. Because I'm sure, it's natural. You're like, oh, I'm going to go see some inmate art show, right? And not realizing that you're going to see something that could be one of the most substantial things that you witness in your life. That there's so much going on in each one of these works, in each one of your works. And so that's Prison Arts. We publish a journal of art and writing when we can. We do health education projects. Many years we've collaborated with the Department of Public Health to do illustrations or publications for them, or like the sides of buses, things like that. We've done a lot. One of the most interesting things we did, and then I'll stop talking, is we did a project where it was called Tell Me What You See, and we got youth that were incarcerated as adults at Manson Youth Institution and at the Women's Facility. And we got them to make drawings, either metaphorical drawings or experience, like narrative drawings from their own lives, where they thought about sexually transmitted diseases, or should have been thinking about them. Mm-hmm. And, like one girl, she made a drawing of at the classroom, and there was like a spotlight on the bulletin board, and and the teacher was like, it said chlamydia. It said these sexually transmitted diseases. And then she was like, her head was down on her table. There was like a spotlight on her. Everyone else was a silhouette. And she had like a thought bubble, and it was like the Motel 6 in the thought bubble. And she was thinking. So when another kid, another girl did a drawing of a bulldozer, and it said denial on the side of the bulldozer, denial. And the bulldozer was pushing these rocks, huge boulders, off of a cliff. And they would say things like, STDs, but one of them said mortality. This is a girl in prison, 16 years old, and she's made this metaphorical painting of a bulldozer pushing a rock that says mortality, denying mortality. And kids, they don't understand that we're these fleshy beings, we're going to die. And we had them turn those into posters and handouts, that it was a box set that the gym teachers that teach health education in all the high schools, every high school in the state of Connecticut utilized. So in every high school in the state of Connecticut, about 15 years ago, there were posters on the wall made by youth incarcerated as adults about sexually transmitted disease. And every kid in the state of Connecticut public schools was learning about that from these experience from these people, because that's compelling experience, right? There's something so compelling from that rather than just, some, really ridiculous curriculum.
If I
So-
may for a second,
Yeah.
to touch on that. One of my biggest motivations with art, really doing anything when I was in prison, when you're in prison, you are supposed to be detached from the world, right? You're deprived of your liberty, you are sent away. What the prison arts program allows people like me to do is still have some kind of touch and influence with those outside of prison, even though I'm still in prison. One of my biggest things with anything I do, especially when I was in prison, I never wanted someone to look at my art and say, "Oh, that's good for an inmate." I want someone to look at my art and say, "Oh, wow," and then say, "Oh, an inmate did that? How?" That was always my motivation.
Mhm. Yeah, but the fact that your art was doing your living for you
Yeah,
on the outside.
exactly. And touching people, and so people are now experiencing that or connecting with that who I'll never meet, who I'm not supposed to meet because I'm supposed to be in a
Right,
corner somewhere.
right.
Um,
And do you think that you were supposed to be, or that's what you thought you were supposed to be?
well, that's what
The prevailing
state
idea, or?
dictates for you, right? It's like, no, you're not supposed to. They monitor your mail. They dictate who can write to you, who can send you money, who can support you. Like, I'm still on parole. I can't write letters to certain people.
Right,
I can't go and visit people that I've known for 30 years.
right.
I have friends of mine who I consider brothers who are still locked up
Mhm.
that when I can't think about because I just start crying. I can't go see them, even though I'm out here, right? So they're still controlling that aspect of my life. My godmother was a CO in New York. She ended up becoming like a captain. She retired. She still could not come to see me, even as a retired officer from a different state, right? And then she got COPD and was terminal. She wrote her DOC and asked for permission to come see me. They said no, and she honored that. My godmother. This is right. This is how they control every aspect of your life. So things like the prison art program give you that.
They really break through all that.
Yeah, they give you that reach, but they also give you that help.
Yeah. All right, so there you go. We're all
This is
done.
very powerful. Very this question's for Jeffrey. How did the prison arts program start and how has it developed to become what it is now?
So just really quickly, it started in 1978. There was this great guy who's now retired, Doug Ullmans, who was the director of volunteer services for the Department of Correction, and Gordon Bates, who was the executive director of the CPA at the time. He was a reverend, and they was at the same time, 1978, California started a program, and their program was really the main focus of it was job, training, to get people to have marketable skills. So it was, and whether they were art, but it could be cleaning, public sculpture, things like that. There was a lot of that going on as well. But they started this correctional art program with a Vista volunteer at the main office of the Department of Correction. And then it evolved over the years, and it was for a long time, you were able to use inmate welfare fund money that came from the sale of commissary. So they'll sell you all these things, and they make money off of it, and then a little bit of that money, they took this inmate welfare fund. And for a while, the prison arts program was able to use that inmate welfare fund at each facility. We could hire an artist and then make a contract, and then the department, that facility would hire the artist to provide and pay that artist. And so then there were a lot of artists, musicians as well at that time. And that was like the height of the number of people involved in the arts in the Department of Correction. And that lasted into like the mid-90s. And then they decided that inmate welfare fund money could only be used for things that served absolutely everyone. So basketball, I could buy a basketball, I could buy padding for the gym. And really, that's what it ended up being used for. And we could no longer do that. So we had to write all of our grants to pay for that. And that really changed that aspect of it. At the same time, when I and a couple other artists got involved in it in the early 90s, we really like changed it from being this academic program to being more like a spiritual program in a way. You know, it's really like preaching art. Preaching art is a way to find yourself and a way to affect change in your environment, in your interaction with other people. And technical skill took a backseat. And obviously, as you can see, there's incredible technical skill. But how that evolves is through drawing. You know, for the most part, you learn to draw by drawing. We really preach that aspect of it. We do teach technical skill, but we think that that's, like, to me, I would say like the most essential ingredient to making good art is authenticity. That's the main thing, is to be authentic, is to not be a poser, not to be someone who's trying to be like something, which is so much of art school. You know, you're like something else that you see, you're fitting into something that you already see exists. You're measuring yourself up to something that exists. And, you know, for me, I think that being an artist is to be someone who pursues something where you can't really measure up or validate it in any way, you know, that you have to feel it. You have to know that it's you're going somewhere because you feel you're going somewhere. So authenticity is the number one ingredient, we believe, in making art. And that the second most important ingredient is rigorous endeavor, is spend time making art, which works perfectly in prison. You know, it's like penance, right? It's like you're doing penance. Your shoulders should hurt when you're drawing. You know, you're putting all those hours into that piece of paper. It should hurt. You know, a lot of these drawings where we ask people to use a whole pen. Take a whole pen. I want the ink from a whole pen. It's, you know, it's on purpose. You know, it is like doing penance. It's perfect for prison. And that's how you learn to draw. So that's really where we've gotten is, and then the other aspect is that a lot of it was making art that really never left the prison, right? And we started, you know, there's some good examples as far as Pedro de Clay, who really like took off in the early 90s. All of a sudden, what the artist statements that he's, all of a sudden, those are, you know, on the front page of the New York Times. You know, all of a sudden, the things that artists are thinking and saying one time a year with the annual show are getting out into the world. And that became a huge part of our work. And sometimes it's in the detriment of the prison arts. We have a contract with the state of Connecticut, with the Department of Correction, that pays for about now maybe a fifth of our funding. But it was really essential to our funding when we, you know, we really crossed, ironically, the governor at the time, what's his name? I'll say, you know, like you, what's his name? No, what's his name? Roland, who ironically went to prison. You know, we really crossed him and the commissioner at the time, and we lost all that funding. And we really, like, at that moment realized, you know, we really want to be that conduit from inside to outside. Not just bringing the outside world into the prison, but bringing the world of the prison outside. And so all of a sudden, you would hear from people, as you see, you would hear what people are thinking in the moment when they're really thinking. And it became a huge part of the program. It wasn't just to provide education in the prison. It was to change the physical environment of the prison, change the way people think, develop empathy, you know, inside those incarcerated, inside those working in the prison and within each other, and then have that come out into the world, and so that people would be aware of it. Because I think that's another big aspect of it. You know, it's like, I don't know about you guys, but before I started teaching in prison, I'd never thought about prison. I'd never been to prison. I had no relatives who went to prison. I had no relatives that had been victims of crime or someone went to prison. I didn't realize that I'd been driving by prisons my whole life. At the time, there were 21 prisons throughout the state of Connecticut, and I'd never even thought about it. Maybe that's my privileged life, but there was no criminal justice classes when I was in college, so I never really thought about it, and it's something we really need to think about. But right now, while we're sitting here having this conversation, as you've already communicated, there are people that are living with another person in a 5 by 8 foot bathroom, trying to figure out their lives. It might have many years ahead of them. And that's a real substantial thing that affects us, whether we think about it or not. And I think we really do need to think about it. We need to be aware of it. I think you need to be aware that other people are living lives all around you all the time. And a lot of those lives are being lived in a real isolated, hopeless way. And so I think that's my real long answer. Prison Arts started as sort of an educational program in 1978. CPA really took it in and turned it into a program that really is about bringing awareness in the prison and then making the community aware of how complicated the world is.
Thank you. That's a beautiful answer. James, what was your personal journey like being a part of Prison Arts, and how has your art developed throughout your time in the program?
Well, as Jeff mentioned, when I first got into Prison Arts, I became an artist because of comic book art when I was younger. I was never big in the comic books themselves, the stories. I always thought that was kind of silly. But the artwork I thought was amazing. And then when I learned how the artwork was done, that somebody just sits down and draws a person, and it's fascinating me. So I started. That was my goal, was to become a comic book artist when I was younger. And my whole life I was always discouraged from doing art. Very blue collar family, right? But then when I got older, I got locked up when I was 20. So leading up to that point, I did graphic design, I did some murals, that sort of thing. But then when I got locked up, it's I would draw for money, right? Drawing for money in prison is a big thing. Drawing portraits, handkerchiefs. People love handkerchiefs for some reason. You buy a handkerchief and you draw on it, whatever. And that was the way to support yourself in prison, right? So when I did art for other people, it was that sort of stuff. When I did art for myself, it was mostly comic book stuff. And then when I got into the prison art program, of course, comic book stuff. And then Jeff would yell at me and say, do something like he says that exists only because humans exist. And I slowly got out of that and tried different things. I got political for a little while. I was trying different things. But one of the things I really liked to do when I thought about it was, most people have these stereotypes and perceptions about prison, just as we have perceptions about anything we don't have personal experience about. And of course, most of those perceptions are incorrect, or at least, in ignorance, because we don't know. So what I like to do, what I thought about was, well, let me show people what it's actually like in a way they don't think about it. One of the images I did one time was a bunch of people in a day room watching a Super Bowl. Mm-hmm. Because, when you think about the Super Bowl, you're thinking about snacks, big TV, and somebody's house, maybe a sports bar. Well, in prison, the Super Bowl's really big too, but we don't have a sports bar. So what do? So if you're lucky and you have rec time when the game's on, because you're only out of your cell an hour a day at certain times, everyone gets together in a day room, and people who don't like each other are now screaming at the TV, right? And it's a communal event. I did another image called The Best of Times, where it was a cellie giving another cellie a tray of food. Cooking for other people in prison is one of the most bonding and sacred events in prison. Like when you get cool with somebody and you're like, yo, I'm gonna cook for you, you're gonna cook for me, that's a big deal. One of my friends is here, Dave, the bald-headed gentleman in the back. A week after I met him, he found out it was my birthday coming up, and he made me a cake, right? Can you make a cake in prison? You don't get Betty Crocker. We don't have microwaves, right? We literally have a hot pot, which gets to about 150 degrees, and that's it. So what he did is we have these small little fans. So you take the top cover off the fan, and that's your pot, with the grill on it, right? And you put a bag in there, right? Then you take a box of cookies that you buy off the commissary, you crush it up and you turn that into a paste, and he makes a crust out of it, and he makes a filling and all this stuff. It was amazing. But because of that, because of food, and I'm Italian, so Italians express love through food. So that's how it is in prison. It's like because you're in prison. You can't have a guy, hey man, I love you. No, we're in prison, right? That usually means something else. So we express love through things like food or artwork or whatever. So yeah.
Thank you. So Jeffrey, what is the biggest lesson you've learned from being an art teacher in the prison arts program? And James, what is the biggest lesson you've learned from being an artist in the prison arts program?
Well, I would say, I really, all the things that I professed so far in our conversation, those are things that I really did learn. I think I came into the prison arts program the year I got out of college. And I went to a liberal arts college. I majored in studio art. And I thought I was the greatest. And throughout school, I thought, I want to be an artist. What kind of art am I going to make? And I was trying to think of what kind of art I could make that would be meaningful and substantial. I would think about it. There was really a careerist element to it. I want to be an artist. And then I fell into this through a friend of mine, and I went into Cheshire Correctional, and there were all these people that couldn't help but make art because of who they were in that moment and the things that they needed to communicate or the stature that they needed to try to establish in the prison. They made art. They didn't think about what kind of art they were going to make. They just started totally without pretension. And I realized, and no one had ever, it would have really helped me if when I was a freshman in college, I had a professor that said, listen, I just want to tell you, someone who can't help but make art, they're an artist. They're the artist. No one else is an artist. There are people that are dilettantes or pretend to be an artist or have this idea that they want to do that as a job. That's not an artist. An artist is someone who can't help but make art. And it would really help me. I would have really used that. I sort of wasted my college years, right? And I think that that's the most important thing I learned is that an artist is someone who cannot help but make art. And that you should trust who you are, and it's a big thing in prison, especially Cheshire Correctional with the Wesleyan program, is you'll have people that participate in the Wesleyan program. Well, they think education, they participate in it because they think education is a way that you can raise your stature, have power over other people, right? Where, education is a way to have a better understanding of yourself and the world around you and be more useful to yourself and the world, right? It's not to establish power over other people. And we'll have people that will they'll be in prison arts and then they'll be in Wesleyan program and they'll start coming into the class and they'll be like, hey, what do you think about the dialectic of such and such and such and such? I'm like, what are you talking about, man? Just use the words that are your words. Be you. Don't try to be something out here, right? It's a big mistake for all of us. We go to college or we're looking to be something that we see that's up here, rather than becoming the person that we are inside and discovering ourselves and filling ourselves so that who we are becomes evident to us. That's education. And I didn't really realize that all the things that I thought maybe were petty or, that I thought about music-wise, or those weren't important things, like what I saw at the Museum of Modern Art, that's what's important, right? Something that's validated is important. And I was so mistaken, that who I was and the small things that I didn't know why I liked, but I liked, those were the things that were important. Those are the things I should pursue. Those are the things I should think about. The things that I can't help but think about, those are the things I should think about. So I would say that's the main thing that I learned as an artist and an art teacher, and that I preach now. But then I think the other really important thing, and I'll just keep it at these two things, I'll count that as one thing. And then the other thing that I really learned is that don't underestimate people. You don't underestimate anyone. The person that's sitting next to you on the bus, the person that's driving 5 miles an hour in front of you and is really pissing you off, which happens to me all the time, they could be the person that writes the song or writes the poem or writes the novel that changes the way that I think about myself and the relationship I have with my daughters. It could happen. That people are incredible. Most people have no idea how incredible they are. And that who knows who's going to make it. It could be anyone from any walk of life. And I think that that was the substantial thing that I learned, is that do not underestimate people and encourage people not to underestimate themselves. And that's the thing that I really live by now. That's really what I'm trying to like communicate to everyone all the time, is I'm saying that all the time, is that don't underestimate yourself. Don't underestimate anyone around you. People are incredible, you know? I mean, we see today, it seems like maybe that's not the case, you know, like, oh my God, people are so freaking stupid. But really, I mean, people are easily discouraged. People are easily quashed. People's spirits are easily crushed, very easily. And that's what's happening now. That's what we see around us. It's not that these people are insubstantial all around us. It's that they're just being crushed, right? It's very easy. And we have to we really need to help other people. We need to be there to help them. So those are the two things. Like count those as two things that I've learned.
For me, it's 30 years, right? So it's not just art, it's like life, right? I mean, I'm 51, I'm a different person than I was when I was 20. What art in the prison arts program has taught me, other than like technical stuff, as far as like, I didn't really have a style. I didn't know, my purpose for art was commercial. Either that it was just for fun, doing comic book stuff. And then when I was kind of pushed to find a message, because Jeff used to say, you're telling a message through your art. And I'm like, well, that's dumb. I'm just drawing a picture of this person's face or this character. There's no message behind it. And then people who are too preachy with their artwork, I didn't want to do that. So then I tried with some things, but for me it was just expressing who I am, and I discovered my style. So like friends of mine will look at my artwork and say, I can recognize anything you do from a mile away because of your style. And to me, it's not like purposeful, it's just the way it comes out.
Organic.
It's like,
It's
okay.
organic,
So
yeah.
I'm like, I have to, I don't do that. It's just, all right. And most of my artwork, of course, I don't like, right? Because art is tedious, art is difficult. We have this romantic idea of a person on the side of a road. That's not what happens. It's someone, or if not for me, you make fun of me all the time about how much planning I do. Because I'll have an idea and I'll make sketches and I'm thinking about composition, I'm thinking about placement, I'm thinking about whatever. So it's very technical for me. And then it's like, can I even do this? And most of the time I try to make sure I can't. Because if I can do it, what's the point? I want to push myself. So I'll usually start a project not knowing how I'm going to finish it, not knowing all the tools I'm going to use. And so I've grown in that way, grown in my own, and also the value. That's fun. For me, artwork was always, like I said, commercial. So the value was, I do a picture or a portrait for someone, and it's a family connection. But outside of that, what the prison art program showed me was I can express that value, can express something and touch someone on the outside, again, even though I'm locked in a cage.
If you could, James, if you could explain some of your current artwork on display here. And Jeffrey, if you would like to explain some of the other pieces that are on display.
I was trying to describe one of his artworks. It's something I learned from the brothers. I'll go ahead and it's here. Like one of the things that I'm constantly saying is that, when you make artwork that's genre, like a typical genre, tattoo style work, skulls, say prison, a lot of skulls. And there are a lot of people that they're going to see that. You might have something really substantial that you're communicating in that work, but someone on the outside might just see that as stereotypical genre work, something they're not into. I'm not into skulls. I'm not going to look at that drawing. And I've said to you, so you made a drawing, and it's like now it's 16 years ago. You made a drawing, and it was a drawing of yourself. And it was you with a hacksaw.
Oh, yeah.
And you're cutting off your right arm. And you're halfway through your arm. And we can see at the bottom of it, we see the Bible, and it's Matthew 5:30. And if your right hand makes you stumble, cut it off and throw it from you. For it is better for you that one of the parts of your body perish than for your whole body to go into hell. It's really powerful, but your hand is half off. A lot of people, including myself, I didn't really want to look at that, right? I don't want to, as stylized as it is. And I said, man, it would have been better in my way, my arrogant way of thinking I know everything. And I say, I think that you should have had the saw just hovering over so that it wouldn't be so when we looked at it, we'd know what you mean, but we wouldn't be turned off immediately by what's going on. And we'd be more willing to accept the message. And you looked at me and you said, no. I want people to know that I really would cut off my right hand. And it was so powerful. I want people to know that I really would. That it's not performative. He's not doing this as he's like the role of the repentant criminal. You are battling every day, and you're willing to go to the whatever extreme it takes to make it right. With God and with the world and with yourself. And it was so powerful as a lesson, that drawing for me to hear that, usually, that's it. I'm going to express what I think as forcefully as I think it. And I'm ready for you to be just as forceful in response. And I'll never forget that moment. How powerful that moment was. And, that's you in a nutshell. And that's your artwork in a nutshell, was that drawing. I'll never forget that drawing. Yeah. That's my description of James Pinder's art.
Well, thank you. If you wanted to share some descriptions and explanations of other ones that are up on display now.
Sure. The one on the right, I could tell you exactly where it was when which one, which cell I was in, who was my cellie, conditions. Because it's we don't have art desks. We don't, and a lot of cells, you don't have a desk because your desk is like a shelf. So your cellie might have piles of stuff, might be used for TV. So the one where I'm sitting on the bunk, I did that one because, so the one in the middle where I'm looking in the window, right? I remember doing that one because from my vantage point on the top bunk, I could see the barbed wire through the window, and that was my view, just seeing barbed wire. And then when I'd look out the window, I'd see barbed wire in my face. And it's right, you don't want to see yourself in a mirror and then see barbed wire. So that was my thinking on that one. That picture, the prison arts program really liked. So a year went by, and then I thought, you know what, I want to show people, because now the artwork kind of became a thing. I want to show people what it's like to make something like that. And that was the next picture. So if you look in what I'm drawing that picture. And how you see my templates that I have to do on the left, the pencils all over the place. I got my little radio that's attached to a piece of cardboard that's folded and taped on the wall, because that's how you hold it on there. And that's how you drown out everything, all the noise and the madness. You have the COs going by, and because I'm doing something unusual, he's like, what is he doing? And it looks kind of claustrophobic, but because it is, and everything's right there in the bunk, because that's how I lived. And the piece of paper is as big as I am, so it's folded over my lap, and that's how I would do it. And I'm just trying to convey that. The one on the right, that was from a specific memory when my grandmother died. I was lucky the first 15 years or so when I was in prison. I didn't have any deaths in my family, but then they all started coming. That was the first one. Well, I was reading a letter from my father, who wrote me to tell me that, and I remember the lights were off. The only lights were coming from the block, and I'm sitting on the toilet because that's a chair. It's just a chair. A cell is basically a bathroom. So imagine your bathroom at home, but instead of a shower, it's a bunk bed. That's a cell, right? The toilet's there, the sink's there, and you have very little storage space. So I remember sitting on the toilet feeling like, as a chair, because the mail is slid under the door. And I grabbed, so I grabbed the letter. I see it's from my father. So I sat down. That was it. And I wanted to convey that idea of this is how we get this information. I did another one before called Death in the Family, and it's just a guy on a phone, and where he's just like this, and he's sitting down. They have these phones that are attached to the wall, this chain thing, and you have 15 minutes phone calls, and that's how you find out someone dies. Someone tells you on the phone, or you're really unlucky, and your family tells the staff, and then they tell you. That's a bad scenario. Anyway, two on the left, that's when the Washington Post had commissioned me to do a few works through the prison arts program. The one on top, I wanted to convey, that was an image I had in my mind for a long time. One of the things people don't understand about prison are the relationships you end up having, right? So in prison, in every block in most prisons that I've been in with cells, it's 100 people, right? 2 people to a cell, 50 cells. Most people in prison should be in prison. I was supposed to be, I'm not innocent, right? But in every block, there's about half, maybe 20% or a third of really good people, people who messed up and now they're really trying to get their lives together. They're trying to do their time. They're trying to reconnect with their kids and family and all this other stuff. And the rest of the people are, they're chuckleheads and what they're playing cards. They don't really care. So that minority of us, we find each other in every single block, right? And we become very, very, very close. Think of your best friend or even a sibling. How often do you see them in a week? 1 hour, 3 hours if you're lucky? These are people I'm with 24/7, especially if you're living with them in a cell, right? So we know each other better than we know our own families, our own kids, right? At any moment, that person can disappear from you, whether it's your cellie, whether it's someone, down on the other side of the block that you connect with, gone like that, whether it's a sudden transfer or release, maybe a fight happens or they get caught with something or somebody just get blamed for something and it's just gone and you'll never see that person again. You can't write to them because you can't get a letter from another inmate, right? And the way prison is, it's so segregated. Even if they're in a block that's across from your block, you'll never see them again unless you get really lucky. Maybe you see them in medical. So it's like a death, right? I've had cellies where I was so close to them, like they were like brothers. And when they left, I cried because it was like they died. And I wanted to convey that. And so one of the ways I conveyed it was, it's the same as if someone's leaving. So here, it's someone leaving prison. It's supposed to be like that. You think about leaving prison, the idea is skipping and jumping and hoo-ha, I'm leaving prison. But really, there's a lot of pain associated with it. When I left prison, and that was obviously years after I made that picture, but I was in a program where there was a community, right? I was a mentor in a program with a lot of young adults and mentors. And we were very, very, very tight knit. And I found out I was going to a halfway house because I'd been released. And for 2 days, I sobbed. For 2 days. I'm getting out of prison. You think I'd be happy? But it's the guilt of you leaving, but they're there. Even these are people that I've spent 30 years with. So that's hard. So that's what I tried to convey. And then if you notice in the picture, the officer there is angry because he's got a job to do. And he's like, come on, let's go. What the hell? And that's what they do. They rush you. Rush, 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 rush. There's a saying, hurry up and wait. That's prison. Hurry, hurry, hurry. All right, I'll sit here for 3 hours. And so it's leaving your loved ones behind. The one on the bottom is really me in a nutshell. if you look at the piece of paper, it's flipped over for a reason, because that's a request form that you get. When your favorite governor, Rowland, was governor, his brilliant idea to shrink prison population was to send inmates out of state. And his claim was, oh, worst of the worst, worst of the worst. Well, first off, Connecticut doesn't have 500 worst of the worst. And you can't put the worst of the worst on a bus and send them 16 hours away. So they send people like me. And so now I'm in a level 6 prison, which is the prison I was at, prison you normally teach at in Cheshire. That's maximum security level 4, right? They have one level 5 prison where if you're super violent, that's where you go. Level 6 is for like, if you try to escape one of those places. This is the prison we went to. So there were no pens, there's no pencils. You don't really get paper, right? So all we really had was the handbook they gave us. So I used the back pages of those to draw. And the pen I'm using, that's the pen they gave
Yeah,
us.
just to know, so this is in Virginia, and it was in the late 90s. They were building these prisons there so that all of these coal miners that had no jobs could have jobs. They built the prisons so these people could have jobs. And so you had all of these white coal miners from the mountains of Virginia, and then you had all these people, most not white, coming from Connecticut. And it turned out that, yeah, they claimed to everyone that they were sending the worst, that they were sending their agreement, the contract, right? So it was a way for Virginia to make money and hire these people. And it was a way for us to alleviate this insanely crowded system because we were arresting, incarcerating everyone we could. They would send, so many prisoners, so many of my students ended up going to Virginia as a result. And so they were all these people that had discovered discovered themselves and the skills that they had and their love for these art materials. And all of a sudden they go to a place where the most you would have is a piece of copy paper, 8.5 by 11, and these pens. So you can see there's this flexible ballpoint pen that in order to use it, you have to hold it from the tip of it. Very tedious. And one of the great examples was Nando, Jose Rivera. And Jose Rivera, who got out of prison like 5 years ago after 29 years himself, he went with you to Virginia, and he started sending these drawings on pieces of copy paper or the back of these request forms, made with this little ballpoint pen that he had to hold like that. And he would use the ink from dozens of them on one drawing. And they were these mountainscapes. They were just desolate mountainscapes, what was around him, what he saw outside the prison. And many years later, when they finally, we were able to get everyone back to Connecticut, and he was part of a show at the Visionary Art Museum in Baltimore. And so I had to write this thing to accompany all of his drawings. And he came back and he started making huge ones. Same thing, these barren moundscapes. And I said to him, I'm like, Nanda, man, these are the most depressing drawings. What can you say about these drawings? And he goes, what are you talking about? I'm like, there's nothing, they're so depressing. And he said, Jeff, when there is nothing, anything is possible. These are the most hopeful drawings that could possibly exist. And it was so beautiful, so insane. Again, I was like so arrogant to think one way about these drawings, and he was there, no man, it's the exact opposite of what you think. This is what it is. And it was so beautiful, and it was that experience really changed him from making these pedestrian drawings to making drawings of such substance. And it was made with that little ballpoint pen. But they had guns. Yeah, these.
Every time you're out of your cell, there's a gun.
There's a gun on you from some guy who's now been trained. He's a coal miner. That's the way. Like just the insanity of the prison system and the way that they think about corrections. Yeah, is that right there? Really powerful. Yeah.
Well, and they were told, the officers were told
That you're the worst.
we're the worst of the worst. So they were always expecting us to just start like killing each other. And so they were just playing cards and stuff.
Right. You're silly. It was very hard for prisoners. We lost a lot of great artists to Virginia.
Well, thank you for sharing that, and thank you for sharing all the details about your art. They're extremely moving pieces and We are very grateful to have them on display here, so thank you. You guys have already explained this a little bit. But why do you feel like the Prison Arts is a vital program for people who are in this situation in terms of healing, self-discipline, self-esteem, etc.?
You want to say something?
Of course. Of course you do. So when you're in prison, especially in Connecticut doesn't like people outside of the cells. So Congress had to write a law saying get people out of their cells. Where I was for most of my incarceration, I was let out of my cell for 2 hours a day. 1 hour in the morning, 1 hour at night. Yes. For how long? My life. So whenever there are programs, certain people would sign up for programs or school or whatever just to get out of their cell. That was a thing. I didn't really care. Personally, I wasn't one of those people because I would draw. Like I just get in my little world and draw, and then I would forget about everything else. But the prison program for me was an escape. It was to get out of prison, both physically, but also in my head. So we used to, when the prison arts program was at its heyday, we would all get together in the gym.
Still at its heyday, but at Cheshire, saying that Cheshire.
Yeah, where I was. And yeah, it's, of course, it's beyond its heyday. I mean, shoot, I'm here talking.
Yeah.
Of course, my
Yeah.
gosh. But there would be these tables and we would just sit there and draw. And for that hour and a half, 2 hours, you weren't in prison. You just weren't. Because you're surrounded by other people, everybody's drawing. And there'd be times when it'd be so quiet, super, super silent, which of course isn't prison. And it was just amazing. So it was the ability to get out and then the ability to talk to someone as inspiring and non-correctional mentality, such as Jeff. And it's like you just felt like a normal person. Just right. I was lucky in prison. Most of my incarceration, I had jobs, good jobs, or most of it's about maybe 3/4 of my incarceration, I was on a computer. And so during those jobs, or I was teaching, and during those jobs, I wasn't in prison, right? So if I was teaching, or if I was on the computer doing a project for whatever, because like I was a graphic designer in prison, I did computer repair, I taught various things. But it wasn't prison things, right? And so that was like for those moments where there weren't officers yelling at me while I was doing this. There was one supervisor and he was usually in plain clothes and I was out of prison. And then I'd leave that area and then go back to prison, right? That's why, and that's one of the things that helped me survive. And the prison arts program was like that. And because there were so few of us in the program, as far as like in every block, you might have 3 or 4, right? Out of a block of 100. Because he could only have so many because they're coming from all over the prison. The prison has 1,500 people in it, right? You can only have 20 or whatever, right? But it was like this little cult thing. You see somebody in the hallway, it's like, hey, right? And you meet friends, and it was a special little thing, and you try to recruit other people to put stuff in the show, and they're like, what is that? So it was just one of those things to break me and others out of that prison mentality.
And adding on to that is that when you come down to the workshop, you get away from the knuckleheads in the block, and you get around other people that are of like mind, and you can confirm for each other and affirm and reaffirm for each other that you're not crazy to think that you are who you think you are, which is not an inmate. It's a human being who has aspirations. You start hanging around with other people who have aspirations and you start thinking, well, that's normal. Because when you're in the prison block all day and you have aspirations for something beyond the prison block is going to tell you you're nuts. You're crazy. It'll crush you. Everything's going to crush you. And so I think that that's like what is the most important aspect of prison arts other than bringing someone in from the outside, inspiring or not, bringing someone who's an alien, who's not part of this false adversarial environment, right? That's the big thing, is that we've had this man-made environment, and then we created that environment. And one of the things to really think about is, how old were you when you went to prison? 20. You were 20 when you went to prison. How old are people who become officers? They're usually early 20s, 20, 21. Your synaptical functions of your brain are still forming. And so they start forming in this false adversarial man-made environment. You're all crazy. You're all crazy. The way you think is so skewed. And you think that that's normal, right? And the officers bring that home with them. And you bring that outside. So we need the prison arts program and other such programs to bring aliens in, to remind you that this is bullshit. This is not the world. This is false. The way that you're interacting is not normal, right? And then on top of that, you've got these people that you're interacting with from the other blocks, and you start building these relationships. You start becoming an ambassador for prison arts, right? So you're communicating what I'm preaching to other people. So I might only have 15 to 30 people in the workshop, but then you're going to then spread that disease that I'm, infecting the prison with, to erode the absurdity of the prison, but then also encourage people to get past. I get so many people that finally get into the workshop after years of waiting lists or being in a prison that didn't have it. They're like, yeah, you're the guy that says make art that only exists because you exist. It's like, right. So you got that message, not from me, but from you, from someone else. And that's a huge part of the benefit of prison arts, is that it's this exponential erosion of the prison system. And there's things that we're allowed to do now. So Cheshire, like you're romantic, we can both be romantic about the workshops we used to have, right? It was amazing, incredible workshops. Yeah, they were incredible, powerful interactions that we would turn a space into a non-prison space. I haven't, because at the time there were 2 recreation supervisors. They were the people that, I'm a civilian, I've got no power in the prison. I need to work with other people that help me do what I do. And there used to be 2 recreation supervisors, a day one and a night one. Cheshire Correctional is a massive maximum security prison. It's got this gym that's, constantly in action. So really it's hard for me to roll my tables out to the gym when all that's going on. It has to be at night. We don't have a night recreation supervisor. It's been really hard. We haven't had, since one retired, it's been like 10 years since we've had a workshop. But I can tell you, and you've seen me walking around the prison, is that once a month, and mostly it's because, I've been in the prison system for 35 years. I'm older than everyone who works in prison. And I've built my relationships, because everything happens through those relationships. Once a month, I spend 4 to 5 hours going from block to block, going out into the yard, going to the print shop, going to the marker shop and make the license plates. Like you would imagine, they make all the street signs, all those green signs you see on the highways. They're made at Cheshire Correctional. And I'm able to walk around. I go with either council supervisor, recreation supervisor, and I go block to block. I go in the protective custody. I go cell to cell, and I meet with people in their cells. I have, I think it's 87 artists that I'm working with at Cheshire Correctional right now that I meet with once a month. That's incredible, right? So it's actually better than that workshop. I wish we had the workshop that was tonight. Yeah, but I really, yeah. I love that aspect of it. I love being able to do that. And I think the other aspect of it, I think it is good. I want to maintain my alien status. I really cherish the fact that I'm not out in prison and I can walk around the prison and not be out in prison. But now that I'm in the blocks every month, I'm more of the prison than I ever was before. But rather than having an officer that comes to meet me and brings me down to the gym, I'm going in where the officer's working. And they're like, oh man, it's you again, Greene. And then we start talking. And they're used to me now. And they're used to prison arts isn't weird to them. And it's totally normal that they would pop, 40 cell for me. That aspect of it. I love it. I will also say this, is that at Corrigan Correction, which is a real shithole of a prison, sorry, in Uncasville. And I have a lot of issues there, like getting things going. It's real hard to get things going. But I got into the gym to meet with a group of artists when I was collecting work for the annual show. We've got the annual shows going on Right now, we've got our opening on the 5th, Thursday, February 5th in Willimantic. Please go see that show. There's 161 artists from 9 prisons in that show, over 600 artworks. It's incredible. So I go there, and there's an artist who makes these incredible, sometimes it takes him 2 years, soap sculptures, mountainous castles, things like that. And I go to meet with the group, and he's made, it's easily 50, 60 pounds, dragster. It's like this insane dragster, and he's got like collage cutouts from magazines on the side of it. I forget what it says. It says something demonic on the side of it. The huge, heavy dragster made out of soap and, deodorant bottles and, all kinds of packaging materials, just all kinds of shit. And so I got this thing. And then we have to go through, when I went to the gym, I got to go through the chow hall. Chow's there, I walk through the chow hall. I'm like, where's Waldo? They look at me like I'm Waldo. And they're saying things behind my back about me. And I don't mind. I got a real thick skin. And then I go into the gym and I do my interaction in the gym. And then I got to leave. And the recreation supervisor is not opening the door for me or anything, right? So I got 2 tote bags, I got a portfolio, and I got this 50-pound, 60-pound dragster, right? So I'm holding all this stuff. And I gotta push open this huge metal door with my butt, and I go into the dining hall. And I get into the dining hall, and it's 15 officers shaking down the 15 kitchen workers. So the kitchen workers are against the wall being frisked. And they all turn around, 30 guys turn around, see Waldo holding a 60-pound dragster. And I look at him and I go, and I race through. And I turn around and one of them goes, "You make that?" And I go, "No, I'm just taking it for a ride around the prison." They will never forget that. They will never forget that. And that's prison arts. Like to me, in a nutshell, that is prison arts, is it has allowed this alien to come into the prison and be so not of the prison. It's beautiful. They will never, that's what changes these environments. It's like having this show here. Hopefully will change this environment. Will make you think that, maybe technical skill isn't as important as you thought it was before. And that, that your substance and your heart and who you are is got to get into that work. It's got to be more than a demonstration of technical ability. There's got to be something of real substance going on in there. It'll make you think that maybe it's not the person who went to art school who we should be supporting. We should be supporting, the dishwasher at the local restaurant. That they might be doing something fascinating. And they might be doing it with, soap and deodorant bottles. Who knows, what material. You don't need the greatest materials. I love great art supplies. I love them. But you don't need that to make great art, And so, yeah, that's it right there. If I
Well, you reminded me, sir. You reminded me, and I've completely forgotten, so you mentioned it. Almost every single time you came in during, one of the sessions, I'd hear you say the word bullshit, because there'd be some kind of speech that you would end up giving to somebody that everybody could hear. And you'd always mention how this is bullshit, this place is all bullshit. They were telling me to do this, but we all know it's bullshit. I used to hear that all the time. And I remember,
Can I tell you that there's a guy at Thomas Wood, who's at McDougal Correctional. And he said to me 3 months ago, he sat me down and he said, "Joe, you started swearing too much. You started using," I'm like, "Yeah, I didn't." He goes, "No, you didn't used to speak that way. I don't like it. I don't think you should." And it was a real moment for me to realize that, that I was being just too casual, and I wasn't speaking in a really respectful way. And I was swearing at you, and now, oh my God, I apologize all the time in prison. I'm like, so sorry. I try to be more careful about my language. And, but I don't like paint it. The one thing I just wanted to say is don't paint it
No, no.
that I'm being adversarial. Like this prison is bullshit and these people don't know what they're doing. You know, I try never to do that, you know.
I have a point.
I know there's one. I just wanted to tell you that before you get to your point, which I will totally let you get to, and I apologize for
I don't
all
want
of
you to get
this.
offended. That's-
Yeah. No, I'm not offended, but I just think, you know, like one thing that does permeate your work, you can't help it. You've experienced something I can't, you know, I can't, as much as I've been working in prison for so long, and I feel like I'm pretty empathetic to everything that's going on around me. I feel everything that's going on around me. I really feel that. Is that I have no understanding really. I don't understand being incarcerated. But I'm always against you. Like you have a drawing that's in the permanent collection that I don't have in this show, where you're painting, you're turning the cell into a forest. You're turning the mural, so the whole wall is now, and there's a real pissed off officer looking through the window.
Oh, it's against the rules.
Yeah,
Drawing on the wall of the cell.
but you couldn't help it. You couldn't help
The
but
cell has one.
to dictate, you know, like to depict the adversarial environment is that you are, you know, like it's you against them. You know, it comes through in your work, right? And I'm trying to like not be that. You know, like some of the people that I respect the most in my life are people that are incarcerated in the state of Connecticut. People that I learn the most from are people who are incarcerated in the state of Connecticut. But I've also learned so much and respect so much. There are certain officers and staff who I really admire, and I'm not against them. I'm not against anyone. You know what I mean? Obviously, there's bullshit. There are people that they're there for the wrong reason and they're getting off on it, right? There's totally that. But I'm not against. You know, I don't want to like encourage that adversarial.
Yeah.
I don't want to be part of it. So I just wanted, that was all I was saying.
No.
Yeah, I don't want you to depict it as that because I feel like I'm not.
No.
Yeah, okay.
But you're right with the officers. My thing with officers is, it's just like with the police. It's not the people, it's the training. So they're indoctrinated, right? Like with COs, and I've had close enough relationships with officers and teachers and so forth, that they told me how the training goes. And what they do is they teach about the criminal mind and they try to separate, make this distinction between officer and inmate, because then it makes it easy to do bad stuff to them, right? You wouldn't do bad stuff to them if you're related to them, right? So there's a heavy indoctrination, and every year they have to go back and do retraining, right? And I would hear stories that these officers would tell me about how silly it was and this and that. So I always had the greatest respect for officers who, after going through all that indoctrination and also peer pressure, because all their fellow COs, they're all that one mindset, you all go to a bar together, they're all rah, rah, rah. And yet they still see through all that bullshit and still treat me like a person. Those people I love, right? And I mean, because it's like, I don't know if I could do that. I don't know if I could be in that environment with that much peer pressure and indoctrination and still be that other person who just sees through all that bullshit. But when you bring up the word bullshit, I remember being in the art program, you calling the system, the institution, bullshit, and thinking in my head, because I always try to, devil's advocate. And I'm like, okay, is it? It's like, really? So it's because when you're in prison, you become institutionalized, right? You start to see the environment around you as normal. Okay, this is just how life is. And one of the ways you do a lot of time is you forget or you remove freedom as an option. If you watch a commercial on TV, you have a little TV in your cell, if you buy off commissary for $300, and you see a commercial for pizza, you don't think about eating pizza. Your brain just ignores it because it's not an option, right? Freedom is just not an option, so you just don't think about it. And so you normalize things. And so when I would go to the art program and say things like that, I would think it was kind of like not realizing we're drowning the whole time. But now I got some air. So, oh, damn, okay, yeah. I've been drowning. And that's how the prison art program was for me, right? There were other things, but definitely the arts program. Like I said, I just got out of here, 13 months, whatever. And, you know, after doing 30 years in prison, the state wants to evaluate me. Like, all right, how are you transitioning? You know, so they make you go through these steps. And I was asked, how was I able to transition so easily? Because I was. It was just like, okay. And I told them, for me, it was like getting off a plane. When you're on a plane, there are certain protocols. You don't take off your shoes. You know, you don't talk too much. You kind of, there's certain things that you do. You wait until the plane's level to use the bathroom, turn off your cell phone, right? But then when you get off the plane, you forget all. It's like, oh, that was just the plane. And then you act normal. That's how it was for me. When I get out, it was like, I just got off the plane. And I was expecting to be institutionalized. I was expecting to have a heart going into Walmart and freaking out when I didn't. I'm like, okay, I guess I'm not institutionalized. And one of the reasons I, even after 30 years in prison, was not institutionalized and had all those issues was because I had things like the prison arts program that reminded me what air tasted.
Sorry, I interrupted you there.
No.
That's great.
Great answers. So this is gonna be the last question before we open it up to the audience for any questions you might have for Jeff or James. And if you had to choose one thing that you hope people take away from this exhibit, what would it be?
Oh, first, yes, that'd be close. For me, is just, I'm always amazed, because I look at my family, right? When you grow up as an artist in my family, my sister went to art school, but it's like, it's not honored. I would send artwork home and it's like, okay, yeah, okay, this is from Jimmy, okay, okay. And it would just ended up in a box somewhere. It was like, nobody cared. But then I'd send art to someone else or whatever, or sell to someone and they would cherish it. And to me, that was amazing. So for me, I'm so grateful that all of you are here because all of you understand the value that people have who are incarcerated. People have most likely done crazy bad things. Most of them should probably be there at least for a little while. For some, whatever, even though the whole system's kind of funky. But knowing that they have value and respecting their value and seeing through that, seeing through all the BS, right, that we're told and fed. That these are just people, and I'm so grateful for that. So my thing is just that I just wish that through this program, more people could see. You see what you see.
Yeah, I think I said mostly what I would say, you know, about that. But I would say too that many of the people, like you're saying, there are people in the show that have done the worst that a person could do. Absolutely the worst. And they are capable clearly of the best. Anyone who's done the worst is capable of the best. And usually vice versa. So to know that we're all redeemable and we should do all we can to create an environment where that's possible. And that's the key, is that we create the environment that we live in our homes with our family. A lot of the issues that we have with each other are because we've created an environment that those issues fester in. And we really need to be aware of how we affect and create our environment. Be aware of the environment you live in and how you can change it. You can. We can change anything, right? I would say that that's something I really want you to take out of this show. I would say as well, just, you know, what I always say is that you go to the annual show and you just can't help but realize how many people are living their lives while you're living your life. It's real complicated. The universe is real complicated. There's a lot going on all the time, all at once. I think that that's the number one thing that I try to communicate to everyone that I realize. And then I would say as well, when I started doing this work, you know, did I make $50 a week? You know, like I didn't really pay my rent. I lived in a factory building in New Haven and, you know, so I was dodging the landlord. My life is real tenuous, right? Your life in prison is tenuous. A lot of people's lives are real tenuous. People are just getting by, right? Um, I have, right now, I've got a super solid foundation in my life. And when you have a solid foundation, if you have a solid foundation, help other people. Without question, help other people. When you've got solid footing, help people that just can barely stand up. For sure. That's your responsibility. That's all of our responsibility. And I'm sure of that. And, it's sinful not to, to help other people when you can. That's definitely it. And then just something that I think about when I look at all this, some of these artworks have been in, 100 shows, right? Like there's a drawing by Vinny Nardoni at the end. There's 3 versions of him. Him in the past, him in the present, him in the future, and that future is now who he is now. When you make art, you're immortal. Our lives are real short, but we make things, we affect other people, we become immortal in that way. And be really aware of that, you know what I mean? Really be aware of that we're like, we have the ability to affect, people 100 years from now, 200 years from now. That's the great thing about being an artist, right? That's absolutely the best part about being an artist is that, one, you are like sitting on your toilet in a 5 by 8 foot cell, and there was someone in a museum looking at your work and thinking your thoughts while you were going to the bathroom, right? That's incredible. That you have to be an artist to have that power. You have to be a musician to have that power, is that there are musicians, they're going to the bathroom, they're picking their nose and someone else is singing their words, That's incredible. That's an incredible aspect, power of an artist. But we all have that power, artist or not, to affect other people today and 100 years from now. And you should think about that. Be aware of it. Realize how powerful you are, right? So don't come away from this in despair. You should come away from this like, man, being a person, it's so incredible and so powerful. And there's so many people around us who are aware of it, And that's, I think, the thing to take from the show. And
Thank you. That's a great answer. We're gonna leave it open before we close to the audience if you guys have any questions for James or Jeff before we end our artist talk today. So does anyone have any questions they would like to ask?
And I hope someone does, but I just wanted to also say that back there, so we printed a series of posters through an NEA grant that Trump took away from us. But before he could, I printed a bunch of posters that you can see taped all over Chester Correctional. And one of them, they all say, build your future inside and outside of prison. So we're not putting up posters with a cat hanging from a tree that says hang in there or something like that. There's some real substantial artworks, and one of them was yours.
That's a Chester.
They're all over. When you go through Chester now, this and the other 3 posters, you go into any block.
Because I'm sure there's plenty
They're
of
taped.
posters who would see that.
Yeah.
Ah,
Yeah, they're taped up everywhere with like, weird pieces of tape. It's amazing, I love it. But we got copies, and so if you would like a copy of it, and he could sign one for you, can sign one for you right there. All right, so all right, I want you to sign one for me. Come on. All right.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions for either?
They're free.
Double.
Free.
Really?
Yes.
James, are you still doing art?
Yes, not nearly as much. Balance has been difficult as far as, work. So when you're in prison, everything's, you're so limited, right? And everything's kind of force fed as far as when laundry is, when food is, when your bathroom is, shower, everything is like, so when you get out, now it's just like, all right, here, so what? So I'm still in that getting on my feet stage. I'm lucky. I'm one of the very lucky ones. My experience is not average. I've been very fortunate, both in my incarceration, but also out. I was able to get a job very quickly, a decent paying job with good people. I was able to take advantage of a decent housing program that helped me. And so now, a year out, I have a good job, I have an apartment, I have a car, all these things. But finding balance has been difficult. So in having a job, but pursuing other jobs, I've had 2 jobs now for like the last 4 months. I do a lot of side things, whether it's video work or graphic design. I just finished working, doing a video thing for another nonprofit. And so I do a lot of that stuff. So I guess that's still creative. I made a poster for a friend of mine. I told him I would do it. It took me like 4 months to do it. Just because time has been difficult. Because it's like, I work a very physical job because, I used to teach electrical engineering and now I pick things up and put them down for a living. So it's kind of weird, and then when people ask me a question, I explain them how quantum physics works. They're like, why are you moving furniture around? I said, well, I have a past. So it's like, so I get home and I'm 6 off. So I'm just.
So you just gave her a lot of excuses.
It's a lot. I have a lot. My mother used to say, you have more excuses than you know. That's what she would say. So I still do stuff though. I have 2 portrait projects I started kind of working on. But right now I'm in this transition. I'm trying to transition from my current job to working for a nonprofit full time. So that takes a lot of my time. But yeah, I'm still an artist, 100%.
Yeah, don't forget you're an artist, but being an artist isn't in your mind. It takes action.
No,
So you're gonna be making art.
if I don't have.
You're gonna ask him this question next year, and he will be making art.
Yes.
Because a big part of prison arts is the alumni, was working with alumni. It's a another real interesting aspect of prison arts is that we're really the only project that works with people inside prison and then continues to work with them on the outside. It's like we're really honored to be allowed to do that. And part of my job is to remind you.
I haven't done one of those since I've been out.
Yeah, but you will.
I'll say that.
You will.
Yes.
Soon.
Yeah, sure. All this,
We have alumni
Like I said,
exhibitions. We,
Yeah.
50,
Yeah.
70, 80 hours, some of those, it's like, all right. It's a lot easier to do that when you're in your cell 22 hours.
Got to budget your time. It's time management. We all have to deal with it. Everyone's dealing with it. You don't have
I'm
kids.
the worst with time management.
Yeah, time management.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Yeah.
Jim, so when you're doing your art, right, you said specifically that you focused on using colored pencils, but I assume that there's a very limited amount of materials that you're able to use, so you theoretically would only be using colored pencils or ballpoint pencils. You said, now that you've gotten out, do you have a desire or an interest in working in other mediums such as like painting or play, or do you only because of that you just specifically use you want to stick to just drawing and colored pencils in that term of medium? Right? Have you ever like envisioned yourself working in other kinds of art? Because there's so many, such a vast amount of mediums you could work with. Have you ever thought that you maybe want to work in another area?
Well, there's an evolution to that. So when I first got locked up, it was just number 2 pencil and ballpoint, right? Like the cheapest, crappiest ballpoint pen. And that was all you had. And then they'd sell colored pencils that you could, the kind of colored pencils you buy at CVS, right? A little kid pack, 8 gums, whatever. But with the prison arts program, also they get decent pencils, good stuff. And then because of the prison arts program, they created an art commissary list. You can buy certain art materials and decent pencils or paper. Because most of the time you're working with copy. And most of the art I've created in prison is on copy. So you get these art books and they would say, oh yeah, you want to do this and you want to do that. And you says impossible because of the materials we have. I did black and white for a long time. I didn't get into color for like 10 years. My last 10 years in prison, I was very, very fortunate. So I was, because I became a little more well-known as an artist. So prison would hire is a strong word, but asked me to do murals. So I've done several murals in the prison, some really big ones. And that's how I learned how to paint. One of the murals I did was when I was doing electrical engineering stuff. There's a 50-foot wall and my boss wanted 5 by 5 foot portraits of the greats of electronics. And I never really painted before, so the first one was terrible. And then the second was a little better. The next one was a little better. And then they got a little better. And then when I got to the 10th one, I was like, all right. And he's like, oh, you're done. I was like, no, I gotta go back to the first one. I don't know what I was doing the first one. You know, so that kind of thing. And then I got, and I was in a program, so I was doing video editing in prison. I was doing graphic design. I went to the DMV to get my license, and I'm looking around. I was like, I made that sign.
Yep.
I made that sign. I made that sign. It was funny. And then I told the person there, they're looking at me like I'm crazy. She's like, no, really? Never mind. So, or I'll say license plates. So like, I know who made that license plate.
Yeah, one time I went into the marker shop to meet with a couple of guys, and one of them had just, you know, his mom had gotten a vanity plate, and he had written a note in marker on the back of the plate, and then sandwiched them together in
Nice.
the wax paper sleeve. And
But since I've gotten out, I have not used anything I didn't have while I was in prison.
Gosh.
So I'm doing video editing now. I'm using the same program I used when I was in prison. The poster I made for my friend, same material, same type of paper, because it's what I know.
Yeah.
It's what I'm used to. I know how to manipulate those things and make them do what I want them to do. And like I said, you mentioned a play.
Huh?
Did you mention clay?
Oh, like I meant like if you want to use like clay, like
Oh,
or
clay.
like metalwork or
Yeah.
like sculpture. Or
Yeah,
like-
I even then I was able to do a little bit, but yeah, mostly I just like the colored pencil thing. And my thing, I never liked the way colored pencil looked, right? I don't like that sketchy look. So my aim with colored pencil was always to make it look like a painting,
Gosh.
right? I remember I read a book one time about, and it was entitled Colored Pencil Painting. And there are methods that they would use, like using water and oil. Well, I couldn't do that. I crap. So my thing was to make that look, and that's where kind of where my style came from. Like when I was first, a lot of my stuff looked a little too cartoony because it was too smooth in the beginning, and I had to kind of refine that. But I'm just used to it now, and it's when I did the painting. I love the painting because it's so fast.
Yeah.
Because one of these things would take me 60, 70 hours. If I painted it, it would take me a few hours, so I like the painting because it was fast. But in my place, I don't have any paint. I have a bunch of pencils. Most of that he gave me.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
So he says paint or colored pencils or both.
I'm mostly colored pencil.
So did you have a sharpener?
Oh, in prison. So every block has like those old colored those old pencil sharpeners you'd have like as a kid in school with right? You'd have one of those, but 100 people in a block have access to it.
But it's not just that, it's that as soon as you put a new one up, someone's trying to sharpen something to stab someone else with it. And, within an hour, the thing is ruined.
It just eats the pencils. There's an art to kind of using it. And then what you do is once you you don't want to sharpen it too much, right? And then once you kind of get it sharp and it gets dull, you take a nail clipper, right? And you kind of get the edges of it because as soon as you put it back in that pencil sharpener, you're losing half the pencil. And the pencil itself is so valuable because the pencils you buy off commissary are garbage. So I'd have these flesh tones that I would get from Jeff, these great like ochres and peaches and
But did you use
Terracottas.
emery board? You ever use the emery board? Sand them?
no, we couldn't get the
You couldn't at Cheshire.
no.
So
So
that's one of the things I really preach,
yeah,
is
well,
using an
they
emery
wouldn't-
board.
Yeah, I tried. So they had they have like a little form, commissary form, where you could order things, right? And they had one little section for the women's prison, and that included things like nail file,
Right.
whatever hair products.
Because at McDougal,
They wouldn't give us this.
McDougal, we got the.
Oh, that's wild. So where I was for most of my incarceration was Cheshire. Cheshire is Connecticut's version of Alcatraz. The officers call it the Rock. There's a big rock when you first enter Cheshire that says the Rock because that's their mentality. Cheshire used to be the level 4 prison that you went to as punishment because the system was originally set up where you go to McDougal, which is like a college campus prison, right? Not anymore, but it used to be. And then if you messed up there, you go to Cheshire. Well, by the time I went there, overcrowding was like, okay, you just not enough space. We're going to stick you in this hole. I'm like, what? And I remember a lot of my friends ended up going to McDougal. people that I needed to reach out, right? Now, I had a lot of time, I wasn't a troublemaker, and all those people went to McDougal. So I went to Cheshire. I'm like, I didn't do anything. So I actually wrote the word. I wrote the word and I said, hey, I'm not a troublemaker. I shouldn't be here. A unit manager called me into his office and said, I see you wrote the word. And I said, yeah. And then he started typing up my information on the computer. He said, oh, Mr. Pinder, okay, you have this much time to serve. Okay. And he said, yep. And he looked at me, he's like, we don't owe you a goddamn thing. I'll never forget that. I was like, all right. So, yeah, so I did
Well,
most of my time.
McDougal's the worst, I gotta tell you.
It's worse than Cheshire now?
Much worse. It's always been worse than Cheshire, because the one thing you don't realize, McDougal is a more modern prison. You know, just real quick on prisons, is that there's all these prisons in Enfield and Summers. And that they built in 1963, Summers Prison, which is now called Osborne. And it's all windows. And it's because the land that all those prisons are built on was a farmer donated. It's a Shaker, there was a Shaker community. And it was a Shaker farmer who donated all that land to the state for the building of prisons under the stipulation that wherever an incarcerated person was, they would see the outside world. They would stay connected to nature. And so Osborne was all windows, like the panes were this big, bulletproof glass, but it was all windows. Wherever you were, you could see the outside world. And when they built Northern Supermax prison behind Osborne, they had to be reminded, right, towards the end of building it, that it was a stipulation that you had to be able, so they put these little slits where you could see a little slit of the sky. And that counted as the outside world. McDougal is like that, right? It's like that, little slits. And it's like the xenon lights, this lighting that's like the street lamp lighting, it's green hued. Everyone looks green. It's really like, it's the most enervating, dehumanizing environment. Cheshire, you see the outside world from some places, and it's sort of like dilapidated, and there's crumbling brick, and that's so much healthier to see than this cinder block that's been painted 20 times,
Yeah.
and it's got this green hue lighting and a little slit of a window. That's the worst. You're very lucky that you were in Cheshire. Cheshire, yeah, you were in McDougal. You know them, but I mean, Cheshire is sort of like always in a state of entropy. It's always falling apart, and I think that's more healthy to be in. I think it's a little more healthy. Yeah, I mean, it's all horrible. It's all bullshit. But that I think is healthier, just from an outside observer. Yeah, that's my opinion.
Are there any more questions?
For James, you said that your process is very technical. What's your favorite part to start a new piece?
The first sketch, the thumbnails, absolutely. Because it's not like I see an image in my head and like any one of those, like that's how it looked like in my brain. No, not at all. That's not how I just get an idea, right? That's, I think visually. So there's what it's like cloudy. And then I'll make some sketches. I'll have a piece of paper and I'll do some sketches. And then those sketches will I'll make these little thumbnails where I'll make a little box. I'm like, okay, kind of, where I'll draw a picture and then put a box around it. Okay, this is where I frame it. And then I'll look at it. Then I'll start thinking about things like composition. It's the foreground, how the eye is going to look at it, because we look at everything. I get technical because we look at every image, everything we read or look at, we go left to right. And then depending on what's in the foreground, it tells you where your eye gets stuck, contrasts are. So it's like in these images, I don't focus on that too much, but I'm aware of it. So it's like, okay, so like I want a high contrast here or not here. I want to be careful of that. So then I'm thinking about composition. I'm thinking about placement. I guess, I'm trying to think of an example of the picture. Like, for instance, the one where I'm sitting, the letter, right? There's a reason why there's that much space above my head. There's also a reason why the figure is on the right. So if that figure was on the left, your eye, what happens when you have your foreground picture on the left, your eye goes past it, kind of has to fight to go back. When it's on the right, it gets stuck there, right? When you look at it, it's kind of, so if you look at all of my pictures, really, the subject's on the right, or he's facing left. right? That's why. So because when you go, right, you kind of, and then you have to kind of fight away to get off of it and come back, fight to come back. So that's why like the foreground part where I'm looking at windows, right? And even with the one where I'm sitting on the bunk, it's because when your eye looks at it, you see the cop, but then you kind of go, you see me, and then you kind of have to push yourself to go back to the cop, like in your mind, right? It's just, so that those type of things I think about. And then of course, it's like with the cell, you have to be careful when you're drawing a cell in prison, because if you draw it too accurately, they can give you an escape charge. That's a thing. I've had 3 friends of mine suffer. So I changed things a little bit. The cells usually, inside the cells usually aren't gray. They use like a baby blue, soft kind of a color that's very like desaturated. And a lot of the blocks are either greens or blues. So I would change that. Some of the angles I changed, but for the most part, I'm actually surprised looking at them how accurate they are to the cell. Like, oh, I was a little close, Jim. You gotta be careful. We could, so, yeah.
Thank you.
I'm just wondering, as you're into freedom now, and how are you going to connect with the artists out here? Because I think that's your next step. And there's so many art organizations, and there's just so much stuff going on, and your work is outstanding, and I think it needs to be shown in more than a prison art
Mhm.
setting. But as, you as a bona fide artist, and when he was asking other mediums, I would encourage you to go to Jerry's Arboretum and just walk around, just spend your money and fill up your, and it's just, I just did this yesterday. I teach kids, and, they're make frogs, and it's just like, how can you be out there for the community and give back? So much was taken away from you, but I admire you big time,
Thank you.
and you're gonna do great out there. And, yeah, it's just, you gotta find the artists, because they're the ones, we're out there.
Amen to that.
Yes. So thank you everyone for coming to the Living Inside Artist Talk. If we can have a round of applause for my name is Molly Martino. I'm on the board here. I just wanted to let you guys know of a few different events that we have during this exhibit that are all free if you would like to come to them. We have our Connecticut River and Roots music series. The next one is going to be on January 31st, which is a Saturday, and that's at 2 p.m. We have a Justice Dance Performance Project on February 7th, which is also a Saturday at 2 p.m. And we have Black History Month open mic on February 21st, which is also a Saturday at 2 p.m. So those are all events that we have, and this exhibit is open until February 28th. So if you ever want to come back and, spend some extra time looking around, feel free. We are closed tomorrow for the snow, but feel free to come back on another weekend or Thursday evening to take a look around and look at these really great pieces of work. Thank you so much for coming today.